about
Yeah.
the world around you, just everything?
Yes.
Are you, yeah?
Yeah, and it's the very, very best part of my job is
Yeah.
research. And something that I kind of came to slowly over time, and in fact really started with Magician's Assistant, which is a book, oddly enough, about a magician and an assistant.
Yeah.
And I got halfway through the book, and the only person who reads my books while I'm writing them is Elizabeth McCracken. And I sent her the first half, and she said, "Girl, you know nothing about magic, and it's kind of embarrassing." And I thought, oh, wow, I really don't. So I stopped, and I started doing research about magic, and what I discovered was that I hated magic, and found it just repulsive. And I hadn't thought about it at all before I went into it. Sawing women in half as a form of entertainment. So after that, I was more careful in thinking about what I wanted to learn about and really picking things I knew nothing about. I knew nothing about opera. And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be fun to have an opera singer in this book? And then I would be forced to learn about opera. I've written a lot about science, which I have enjoyed tremendously, and places that I don't know anything about. It's just a great way to always be in school and enrich myself and my own life. I try to do my research when I'm either halfway through a book or when I'm done with the book.
Yeah, I do too. For what little research I do, that tends to come right exactly
because otherwise you just go into the tar pit and you get stuck.
Yeah.
And there's nothing I hate more than a book in which an author has done an enormous amount of research and by God,
you're going to get every single...
You're going to get every single bit.
Yeah.
The book that I willingly trash out loud every place I go for this is Saturday by Ian McEwan. A book I hated.
Yeah.
And I say that as someone who has loved many other Ian McEwan books, although, wow, not all of them. But it's a book about a neurosurgeon. And he clearly did a lot of work, and he wants you to know that he did all of this work. And it just enrages me. Research must be digested and forgotten.
Yeah.
You know, you've got to be natural. You've got to just be in it.
Yeah. Boy, I second that wholeheartly. I guess I asked you about the curiosity because I envy it. I envy it in you. I envy it in your work and in other writers who manage to work it in so well, so effortlessly. I'm always reminded there's a scene in it's the movie Julia. Which is about Dashiell Hammett and Lillian Hellman. And there's one scene in which Lillian says to Dashiell Hammett, she's about to go to Russia, and she says, "Why don't you come with me?" He said, "I don't want to go with you." And she says, "Don't you care about the Russian ballet?" Because she's going over to give support. She says, "Don't you care about the Russian ballet?" And he said, "I don't give a damn about the Russian ballet." And I always, in that argument between two writers, I realized when I saw that I was in the Dashiell Hammett camp and didn't want to be, because they're just there are a lot of things, you know, to be perfectly honest, when I'm being honest, I say I don't give a damn about that. And so I'm always put to shame by writers who have because my curiosity. My curiosity, for some strange reason, it seems to go only in certain directions. It's never satisfied. I keep going and asking the same questions over and over. But it's wonderful, as you say, it's wonderful to educate yourself, among other things, and things don't get old.
Yeah, but I do it a lot to hide the fact that I write the same thing over and over again. And I remember years ago, I first met Dorothy Allison 15 years ago, and she was working on Cave Dweller. And she said to me, "I fear I only have one story to tell." And at that moment, I thought, well, wait a minute, I only have one story to tell. We all only have one story.
Maybe Dickens only had one story to tell.
I think it's absolutely true when you boil it down. But so I like to cloak my one story. I like to dress it up in all sorts of different costumes because it is my one story. And it's interesting because the book that I'm writing now, which I've just started, I want to try to write that one story without dressing it up.
Ooh. We're all on board for that one. We're on board for anything you do.
But you know, without the research.
Uh-huh. Oh, so no research.
So, but you know, close to home, close to the bone, all vulnerable, no big sets, no Technicolor, no surround sound to hide behind. Say, this laid bare is my one little story to tell. And then the book that
does it scare you?
It scares me less having written Happy Marriage, because that was the gateway drug. You know, that opens the door.
That makes sense.
For being able, my family survived. You know, nobody was so hurt. And so now I feel at 50, you know, I just think, who am I protecting? Why am I not just writing from experience? Because I want so much to protect everyone. Yeah. Now I wish to stop protecting everyone.
Well, that's a perfect segue to another question that I wanted to ask you about. We've both written memoirs. And you said yesterday on the radio that actually that fiction is much harder for you than nonfiction. I wasn't clear when we were talking on the radio whether you were comparing fiction to essays or whether you were thinking about Truth and Beauty also.
Nonfiction, fiction.
Right.
So essays and memoir.
Essays and memoir are both in the same.
All fiction
in the same camp.
Yeah.
Truth and Beauty is just such a beautiful, beautiful memoir. And I hurt. I remember reading that, hurting so bad for both you and Lucy in reading that book that I was a little bit surprised that you weren't saying that this book had just kind of rent you asunder to write.
It saved me.
Did it?
Oh gosh, if I wasn't doing this writing thing, I would be a grief counselor. And what I would say, here it is, folks, the good news. Write it down, sort it out. When Lucy died, I wrote an essay about her pretty quickly for New York Magazine because there was a lot of misinformation. And after 3 weeks, people started calling me, and people who knew me, family, people who loved me, close friends. And I would answer the phone and I would say hello, and they would say, "You sound better. You doing better?"
Yeah.
And I would think, I will never be better. How far out of my way must I go to sound bad? I will never be better. And I thought, I am going to write this book because people respect my work and me working. They were not respecting my grieving. Get it over. Come on, speed it up, speed it up. So I went to bed. I wrote that book on a cookie sheet with my computer in bed. I had all of her letters, all of her pictures, all of her music. It was like sticking your hand on the stove. But I stayed there until I was ready to get out of bed. I sat in my Shiva. I stayed with her. And I came out of it with joy of the memory of her. And I didn't get stuck in my grief because I gave myself enough time. And I think, friends, as a society, we do not give ourselves enough time. And we believe that if we ask someone how they're feeling about someone they've lost, we might remind them that this person is dead, as if they have for a moment forgotten. And that I am so lucky, because everywhere I go, people want to talk to me about Lucy.
Right.
And who, you know, or people want to talk to you.
I wondered whether to ask you the question tonight about Lucy for exactly that reason.
Don't you want to talk about your mom? But isn't it part of, you know, she is gone and she is still here?
Yes, that's all true. I want to talk to you. I want to talk with you about her sometime. Just the two of us.
But, you know, it's such an important thing. I don't care how long your mother's been dead.
Yeah.
To have somebody say, "Would your mom have liked this?
Yeah.
You know, would she have come tonight? Would she have had fun?
Yeah.
Do you miss her? Would she have found this funny? Would she have liked this joke?"
Well, that was the question I was going to ask you about Lucy. What do you think she would have? You think that Lucy would have read the book and thought, "Boy, this was my best friend. She really knew me as well as anybody's ever going to know me"? Or would she have thought, you know, "Boy, there are all sorts of things that I thought I had told Anne about that she doesn't know"?
You know, this is an answer that I shouldn't give. And my whole life is spent on stage giving answers I
Yeah.
shouldn't give. I have a stepsister who is someone that I love and has been in my life since I was 7, and she's a psychic. And I have mixed feelings about the whole psychic thing. But she called me up when I was writing the book, when I was almost done with it, and she said, I got something to tell you from Lucy. And I said, great. Lay it on. I want to know. She said, Lucy thinks it's hysterical that you're writing a book about her. She thinks it is cracking her up. But she said she wants you to know it's not important one way or another. It's not what matters. What matters is something so much bigger and happier and better.
Wow.
The fullness of the universe and the fullness of existence that she is in so enormously. And she just wants you to know it's huge. And what you're doing is really sweet and comically funny, and don't worry one way or the other.
Well, I don't know how to feel about the psychic, but I think she's right, who she's been in contact with. But,
well, you know
but
what,
I think she's right. I think Lucy would have cracked up.
And Tina's my sister.
Huge sections of that book. Part of the thing that's so wonderful about that book is that you made us know her so well that we can almost guess the answer to the question that I asked you.
Right.
You brought her so fully to life that when you said what the psychic told you that Lucy was cracking up, I thought, well, of course she is.
And of course, Tina's my sister, and she knows me, and she knew Lucy really well.
Right.
So, there's that too. But
right.
it was the right thing to say at the right time. It was a great gift.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the writing life a little bit. We have a few more minutes here.
You don't want to talk about your mom. I love that book. Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so interesting to read someone's novels, and I've been reading your novels for a really long time and loving them. And then I hadn't read the memoir, and I just read the memoir right before I came up here. I was like, oh, I gotta read the memoir. So different, because it is, especially if you've read a lot of somebody's work, you can really say, this is the thing you're trying so hard not to say.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And it's that anchoring piece of the puzzle of yourself.
Some critic somewhere said it was like getting a skeleton key to the rest of my novels.
Yeah, that's really true.
Yeah. Well.
So well done, you.
Thank you. Let's talk about the writing life.
Let's.
You said yesterday. I thought it was fascinating because we're both involved. We both care a lot about the lives of talented young writers, and boy, there are just so many talented young writers in the pipeline these days, and their world is different from ours. And I remember you said yesterday that you had this feeling that nobody who came after you had as good a career as you've had.
I had the last great career.
Or the possibility of as good a career. Would you like to just speak to the issue of...
I got on the ship and the gangplank just hit me in the back. My first book, and I do a lot of public speaking, and I work on different lectures, and I had this one lecture that I gave about money that was really, I thought, really interesting, kind of the numbers and crunchings of books. Patron Saint of Liars, I went back and looked all of this up, sold about 10,000 copies in hardback. Taft sold about 8,000 copies. Magician's Assistant sold about 16,000 copies. Bel Canto sold about 20,000 copies in hardback. And then it sold 1.5 million in paperback.
Right.
So there's the point at which the story changes. That doesn't exist anymore. You can't sell 8,000 copies of your second novel and get a contract for a third novel. And I feel like the people who were invested in me were really in it for the long haul.
Yes.
And it was A-OK that I became financially bankable on my fourth book.
Right.
They were willing to wait. And I know
And that used to be the norm.
Absolutely.
People didn't expect writers to hit their stride until their fourth or fifth book.
Right. So now it's like if you're not California Chrome out of the gate,
right,
they're going to drop you. You're
right.
not going to find anybody to publish your next book. That is terrifying.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that if you don't make your numbers, and I've known a lot of people, and people who had big careers, who had a couple of flops,
mm-hmm.
and can't, it's like the numbers are there now, and they can't make it.
That was the thing too, is that the numbers didn't used to be there. Not when a book
Right.
when a book flopped, it was a matter of speculation. I've always found it funny that my reaction to most books is that they've done better than they have. When you look at the numbers, you often find that the book hasn't generated the kind of sales and income that you would think. I think by nature, especially us. I mean, we look at ads in magazines and we see books in bookstores, and we're really tuned into how much we see a certain book and how much wind it seems to have in its sails and all of that. And we always have in the back of our minds that books have done really well, and then sometimes we find out that they really haven't done well at all. Some books that get enormous press in hardcover, sometimes they don't even get a paperback
Right.
sale. They get enormous critical success, but it doesn't sell, and so you don't even get a paperback contract. And all of this is kind of new, isn't it?
Yeah, and let me tell you something really new. Let me tell you something.
Do I want to hear this, Ann?
I think you might, because
okay.
I find it really interesting. I am trying, Rick is trying to save publishing. I mean, I feel very strongly about it. These are the people who have taken care of me. This is my business.
Mm-hmm.
And I want, we could go on and on.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys know I own a bookstore. I'm thinking about a lot of different things that I can do for the industry that is it's my business. If I worked at IBM, this would be my business. So my novels sell really well. They give me a lot of money for my novels. Mm-hmm. Books of essays sell terribly.
Yeah.
Unless you've got the name David Sedaris or Chelsea Handler on the cover,
Mm-hmm.
you're going right over a cliff.
Yeah.
So then there's this conundrum. They're going to have to pay me. My agent is going to want them to pay me based on my sales as a novelist. But
Right.
I know that I'm going to flop.
Right.
So, what to do? How can I save publishing? So I didn't take an advance at all on Happy Marriage, and I did it profit share. So that means I get a higher amount of the money, but
higher percentage.
The higher percentage,
yeah.
but there is no loss.
Right.
I can be nothing but a win because I am so fearful that they're going to say, oh, that Patchett book of essays, it didn't sell well. And I looked up the numbers for Franzen's books of essays, for Michael Chabon's books of, not good.
No, I know.
Not good.
I know.
So how can I do this system better? How can I make it work?
I think that's a brilliant idea. What I've done with a book of short stories isn't that different from a book of essays.
No.
And when my book of short stories, The Horse Child, came out, I was just determined that they were not going to give me too much money up front, because it just not because I didn't want the money, but because it just seemed that they were going to hate me afterwards.
That's right.
When the book loses a lot of money,
is this a Catholic thing?
Yeah, that's
I don't want to be a bad bet.
No.
I want them to always say, Patchett, that's a good investment.
That's right. She always earns out.
That's right.
Always earns out. I feel exactly the same way. And for these young writers, younger writers coming along, some of them with just blistering talent, who don't have the benefit of book tours anymore.
That's right.
Who don't have lots of newspapers don't even, a lot of newspapers don't even have reviews anymore, or their sections have shrunk to nothing.
And can I just say, that's the publisher's fault.
Yeah.
Publishers who stand to benefit the most from book reviews cut their ads to save money. Why do we have book reviews? So we can have ads in book review sections.
Yes, yeah.
And Knopf, Random House, HarperCollins, they're like, well, we're cutting back, we're tightening our belts. No more reviews in the Chicago Tribune, in the San Francisco Chronicle. Well, then what do you think is going to happen? Yeah.